Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Samaru channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 14th of April of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where it seems that the Russians began their major spring or even summer offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, lots of changes were recorded on the ground, and most of them are coming from the Sumy direction. But first let's talk about a massive attack that took place before the beginning of this offensive, and currently the Russians continue attacking the territory of Ukraine. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning stated that the Russians used 133 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine as of the morning of the 8 a.m. of the 14th of April of 2026. But 8 a.m. doesn't mean that the Russians stopped attacking the territory of Ukraine after this moment. The Russians continue their offensive operation, continue their attacks, and during the day between 8 a.m. and basically the evening of the 14th of April of 2026, we received a lot of very important videos, and it seems that most likely the Russians were attacking the city of Kryvyi Rog, because the most important videos are coming exactly from this area. Let's discuss everything in details. This is the video from the city of Kryvyi Rog, the homeland of the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. A very heavy explosion took place on the territory of this settlement, a very big black smoke. Another important video from the same area, people and civilians from different angles, from different positions, were making videos from the territory of the city, and all these videos, all these explosions are telling us just about one thing, that something big was destroyed on the territory of the settlement. Another important thing, that the city of Kryvyi Rog was attacked by Russians, have been attacked by Russians since the beginning of the special military operation, probably hundreds of times. But last time, since the beginning of this year, the Russians were attacking the city of Kryvyi Rog only before the beginning of another massive attack. Massive attack when talking about drones and missiles altogether. So this is the situation in this area, and the sources are saying that the Russians attacked several objects of energy infrastructure, several substations were destroyed, probably even several military and industrial complexes were also destroyed. So once again, if we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of March, we will receive lots of updates from the city of Kryvyi Rog. And the last time when the Russians attacked the city of Kryvyi Rog took place probably somewhere at the beginning of March. Let's find this. Yes, the previous attack, the previous massive attack, it seems that took place on the 28th of March of 2026, right before the beginning of the massive attack with drones. So it seems that Ukrainians have a layered air defense system, a layered air defense on the territory of the city or around, and the Ukrainians are using the city itself to hide air defense forces when it needed, when it needs. And for example, on the 28th of March of 2026, the Russians attacked the city of Kryvyi Rog significantly using hundreds of drones. Lots of explosions were recorded, and several days after, more precisely on the 1st of April of 2026, the Russians carried out the massive attack, and most of the drones were flying right exactly through the city of Kryvyi Rog. But the Ukrainians on the 1st of April couldn't do anything with the Russian drones, because on the 28th of March the Russians managed to suppress the Ukraine's air defense systems around the city. So today we can see the same thing, but the current attack, today's attack, has differences. First of all, yes, the Russians attacked the city of Kryvyi Rog. The Russians used dozens of drones, and most likely the main purpose of these drones are to destroy air defense system of Ukraine, systems and warehouses, missiles, stockpiles, and so on. But the main difference is that the Russians decided not to wait for a day or 2 days, not to wait for upcoming night. First, the Russians attacked the city of Kryvyi Rog, and right after the Russians finished with the siege of Kryvyi Rog, we start receiving updates that the Russians launched hundreds of drones in the direction of the western parts of Ukraine. So this is the first picture that was published today, and according to information we have here, we can see the situation in the area of the southern parts of Ukraine somewhere around at 2 or 3 p.m. or something like this. And in this video, this picture, we can see first drones entering the territory of Ukraine, the southern parts of Ukraine, right in the area of the siege of Kryvyi Rog. This is the second picture that was published probably 15 minutes later, and as you can see here, we have probably several dozens of drones that were entering the territory, the airspace of the siege of Kryvyi Rog, and here we have probably 25% of the first batch, which means that most likely over the siege of Kryvyi Rog, the Ukrainians managed to bring down several drones, and probably several drones attacked objects around the siege of Kryvyi Rog and so on, and we probably saw videos about this. And later we start receiving more updates that these drones continue flying further in the northwestern direction, and we start receiving updates that the second batch of drones entered the territory of Ukraine from the northeastern direction, from the area of the siege of Sumy. And we see that right after the second batch from the area of Sumy entered the territory of Ukraine, the Russians launched the third wave of drones from the area of the siege of Kryvyi Rog, but this time, as you can see, the Ukrainians couldn't do anything because the air defense systems around the siege of Kryvyi Rog were suppressed totally, completely, and the Russians continue their flights, their drones continue their flights further in the direction of the central part of Ukraine and in the direction of the western parts of Ukraine. And at this very moment I started making the video, so that is why I don't know what happened next, what exactly the Russians were planning to attack and what the Russians attacked in the end, and the results of this massive attack of drones we will discuss during the next video. So this is the situation. The Russians began their spring military campaign, late spring military campaign actively, and it seems that all these drones have just one purpose: to destroy the logistics, to destroy substations, to destroy ammo depots, warehouses, and so on, just with one purpose: to allow the Russian troops to advance actively along the entire line of combat contact. Meanwhile, Zelensky today came to Germany, where he had a meeting with the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, and the President of Ukraine and the Chancellor of Germany were talking a lot. And let's discuss the most important statements. Russia must end this war as quickly as possible. It has no chance of winning it. That was stated by Merz. Another important thing: we're going to step our measures against Russia's shadow fleet. We'll also be working together on the Middle East in order to increase defense capabilities and organize this better. We elevate our bilateral relations with Ukraine to the level of a strategic partnership. Another important thing: Russia should end this war as quickly as possible. We have already discussed this, and this one, the number of Ukrainian men who have taken refuge in something we will be working on with Ukraine to limit, because it is crucial that these men are there to help their country. So these statements are very important, and all these statements have just one purpose: to strengthen the Ukraine's positions, but not today, not tomorrow, not even in a week, and not even in 2 weeks or even in 2 months. Everything that was agreed upon and everything that was discussed today on the territory of Germany will serve, and we will see the consequences of these discussions and these agreements only in the end of 2026, and most likely the things that are currently taking place in Germany or have already taken place in Germany have just one purpose: to mobilize Ukrainians from the territory of the European Union, not just in Germany, but probably through the entire Schengen zone, to mobilize Ukrainians, to train them, to build additional new weapons, new missiles, new vehicles, and to prepare a Ukrainian army of 2027, which means that most likely today we can see the beginning of the preparation for the biggest or major counter-offensive operation from the Ukrainian side, which is going to take place at the beginning of 2027. So which means that the Russians still have a lot of time to improve their position significantly by the end of the 2026, and then the Russians will be needed to finish just one thing, to repel this upcoming major counter-offensive operation of the Ukrainian side, which is going to take place most likely at the beginning of 2027. So now we are returning back to Ukraine. Today is the 14th of April of 2026, which means the next thing. In coming 2 or 3 days, the Parliament of Ukraine, the Verkhovna Rada, will have to approve the extension of mobilization and of a martial law for the next 90 days. I would like to remind you that the current martial law and the mobilization and at the beginning of May of 2026, and usually between the 10th and the 20th of the second months during the mobilization and martial law process, the Ukrainians need to extend the mobilization, the martial law, for another term. So the incoming days, this most likely will happen, and of course this will happen because Zelensky currently is backed by Germany, by the economy of the European Union. So that is why the soldiers in Ukraine and Ukraine itself probably knows that they will have resources to continue the clashes with the Russian Federation. So that is why the Russians are attacking. The Russians are trying to improve their positions, and they're doing this. During the previous 24 hours, lots of changes were recorded in the area of the city of Sumy. Now let's discuss everything in details, and these are the changes on the ground. This is the end of the 30th of April of 2026, and this is the end of the 14th of April of 2026. We have already discussed these changes, and during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special or anything new, which means that the Russians are trying to keep this information in secret. They don't want to share with this information with the Ukrainian side, with nobody. They want to keep this information as long as possible under complete silence. But obviously we need to understand that despite all these things, most likely we will receive additional updates in coming days. As of now, we know that the Russians are moving along the border, and the current front line, the length of the current front line of not the front line but of the Russian offensive is around 50 kilometers. The Russians are attacking the territory of Ukraine from the area of the settlements of Miropolye in the direction of the villages of Soikovka. The Russians are attacking in the direction of Ogroidi. We have reports about additional changes on the ground in the area of Krasnopolye. The Russians are storming Novodmitrievka, and the Russians are trying to improve their positions around the village of Ryasne. As of the end of the 14th of April of 2026, we don't know for sure whether this offensive operation is the primary direction of the Russians, or it's just another attempt to distract the Ukraine's attention and to force them, let's say, to redeploy their forces from the area of the city of Slaviansk or from the Zaporozhye direction back in the direction of the city of Sumy, and then the Russians will stop. But these maneuvers will allow the Russians to intensify their offensive operation, let's say, around the cities of Orekhov or Zaporozhye. So as of now, we need to wait, but obviously that in 2, 3, 4, 5 days we will understand everything. Another important video and another important area is the Kharkiv direction. During the previous 24 hours, as for the icons, we haven't received anything special. As you can see, probably there were several attacks carried out by Russians with supersonic missiles of Ha-22 type, somewhere in the area of the settlement of Prikolotne. But the most important video is coming from the Pechenegi water reserve. We have already discussed the situation in this area. If you remember, several days ago I told you that lots of explosions were recorded in this area, and several sources stated that it seems that the Russians were trying to destroy the dam, this dam, the Pechenegi Pechenegi Dam. And today we received this video. Here we can see a Russian drone that was filming the situation around the Pechenegi water reservoir, and here we can see explosions, which means that the Russians were trying to attack this territory with aviation and with bombs. As you can see, according to this video, it seems that the Russians missed the target. The Russians didn't hit the dam. The Russians attacked the territory around, but probably 5-7 meters from the target. Maybe the Russians wanted to attack not the dam itself, but the territory around, who knows. But there are several important things that currently come to my mind when I watching this video. First of all, what the Russians are trying to do, because there are several options and several possible things how everything can develop. First of all, the Russians are trying to destroy the dam. This is the first scenario, and if the Russians are trying to destroy the dam, and if the Russians destroy the dam, obviously this will lead to the situation that the entire territory to the south of the Pechenegi water reservoir, probably this territory would be flooded, which means that the logistic in this area will collapse automatically. The Ukrainians will not be able to support their forces and their contingent in the most northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region, at least for several weeks. They will be able, but this is going to be much more difficult. And if the Russians are planning to begin an offensive operation in this area, and together with the destruction of the Pechenegi water reservoir, this can lead to unpredictable consequences. And we are talking not about this situation, not about the situation in this forest. The thing is that the river of Oskol, the river of Seversky Donets, and the Pechenegi water reserve itself, the water there will become much less water, which means that the Russians will be able to continue offensive operation in this area, both in the direction of the most northeastern parts of the region, of the Kharkiv region. So these territories, the Russians may try to take under complete control due to complete collapse of the Ukraine logistic. This is the first option and scenario. But from the other side, the Russians may try to cross the river of Seversky Donets from the east to the west, with the purpose to take under complete control these territories, let's say to the south of this big forest and to the south of the main defense layer of the armored forces of Ukraine, between the villages of Liptsy and Volchansk. So we're talking about this territory. Once again, let's take a look at the map. So this is one of the most powerful defense layers of the armored forces of Ukraine, and the Russians understand that it's just useless waste of time to attack this territory between this big forest and the river. So that is why there is a solution that the Russians may try to outflank this defense layer by crossing the Pechenegi water reservoir from one side to another, and to attack the main Ukrainian positions from behind. So this is another possible situation. Maybe the Russians are not going to do this, but the main idea is that the Ukrainians would be forced to keep forces in this area with the purpose not to allow the Russians to do this. This is the first thing. But from the other side, the Russians are attacking the dam in the area of Pechenegi water reservoir with the purpose to get additional practice. You know that the Pechenegi dam, this territory, this, let's say, construction is well fortified. This construction was created during the Soviet period of time, which means that the quality of this construction is very, very big, at a very big level. So that is why it is a real task for Russians to destroy or to damage this dam with aviation. But the Russians might try to do this not just to destroy the dam and to make the situation that we have already discussed, but to practice before the Russians begin attacking bridges along the river of Dnipro, because the level of defense, the level of these constructions, let's say the bridges through the river of Dnipro and the Pechenegi Dam, these constructions have almost the same level of defense, you know. So that is why if the Russians are able to make a precise strike and to destroy the Pechenegi Dam, this means seems that the Russians will be able to do the same with the bridges along the river of Dnipro. And according to things that are happening right now in the territory of Germany, maybe the Russians came to the conclusion that it's time to start doing this. Who knows? Who knows what is going to happen next? So that is why it's too early to make any conclusions. One thing is clear, that something is happening. Something is happening, and of course, lots of things might change in coming days, and probably we can be even surprised with everything what is going to happen. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on other front lines. As for the territory between the city of Kupiansk and almost still the city of Slaviansk, we haven't received almost anything. We have the same stories. The Russians are attacking the villages of Alexandrovka, city of Liman, the settlement of Barova, and probably the Russians are trying to finish the battle for the city of Kupiansk, but without significant changes or big reports or something like this. So just regular activities on these front lines from the Russian side. The city of Konstantinovka, the clashes in this area are very heavy. Furthermore, the Russians during the previous day have improved their positions along the perimeter of the city without improving their positions on the territory of the city itself. So the situation is very difficult in this area. The Russians began the assault operation of the city of Konstantinovka in November of 2025. And still the Russians haven't managed to improve their positions. According to information that we can find in the internet, the only thing that I would like to point to attention once again is the video with the Russian flag in the southeastern part. We discussed this video yesterday, and telling the truth, this video forced me to think that most likely the Russians have much better positions that we can see right now on the maps of different mappers. The Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours, nothing special was recorded. There is a very big activity and of both the Russians and the Ukrainians. The Russians are attacking Ukrainian forces with FPV drones on the Orekhov direction, trying to not allow the Ukrainians to use these logistic lines for supply support purposes. So the activity in this area is very big, but as you can see, without changes. So we are waiting for the evening and late nights between the 14th and the 15th of April of 2026. Most likely the Russians will continue their drones attacks, as you can see even according to this picture. The Russians and the Russian drones are just at the beginning of their road, of their path. Most likely the Russians will continue, and the sources are saying that possibly today the Russians will attack the territory of Ukraine also with the hypersonic missiles of a Zircon type. We have nothing that can confirm that the Russians are going to use Ha-101 missiles and their strategic aviation. So most likely we will see attacks with Iskander missiles, with the hypersonic Zircon missiles, and more drones through the territory of Ukraine. We have covered the most important updates about the situation in Ukraine, and now let's talk about the situation in the Middle East, where the United States of America is trying to establish complete control and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, but it seems that as of now the blockade doesn't work. During the previous day we received lots of updates on this matter. We received lots of updates about aircraft carrier groups, about vessels that were trying to cross the Strait of Hormuz. And probably the most important update is that a sanctioned Chinese linked oil tanker reached Stary, passed through the Strait of Hormuz despite the US blockade, according to shipping data. Probably this is the first update that we received about the situation, and probably based on this update we see that oil prices dropped significantly. So the United States of America promised to establish a blockade, but nothing worked out. The vessels and tankers, especially Chinese linked tankers, managed to cross the Strait of Hormuz, and based on these updates oil prices dropped. But those were just first updates. Later we received additional clarifications. And the most important thing that it seems that Rich Steady haven't managed to cross the Strait of Hormuz. Later we received this video where we can see how exactly the vessels in this area were behaving. And as you can see, there were two vessels that were trying to cross the Strait of Hormuz, but the sources stated that, for example, Austria vessel returned back and the Rich Steady stayed at same position for a while. Later we got report that Rich Steady managed to get even further and managed to cross the Strait of Hormuz almost till the end, but later we received the report that the United States of America blocked the Strait of Hormuz in the area of the Gulf of Oman, and every single vessel that was entering the Gulf of Oman was turned back by the US military authorities, and the vessels returned to their main positions in the area of the Persian Gulf. So for example, this is the article that was published by different sources. Rich Steady, the vessel that we've discussed, ships originating in Iranian ports are being turned away, contrary to reports that Iranian-linked ships are breaking to the US blockade. So it seems that despite the situation, despite the difficulties and so on, we see that the blockade is developing. Now it's just at the beginning of the process. The United States of America probably needs time to finish the blockade, and but in time, in days, in weeks, the blockade will become more and more difficult for the Iranian side. Another important thing is that despite all these things, we see that the United States of America is not outruling the idea of the massive attacks and more massive attacks on the infrastructure of Iran. As of now, we see that the United States of America is continuing its regrouping. For example, as of the end of the 14th of April of 2026, we know that the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier group strike group is located in this area. Furthermore, the Abraham Lincoln carrier group has moved closer to Iran. It has been spotted about 200 to 300 kilometers of the coast of Iran. This puts them within the range of Iranian missiles and drones. But due to the fact that we have a ceasefire or something like this, we don't have a hot phase of the conflict between Iran and the United States of America. So that is why the Abraham Lincoln carrier group can feel itself without any risk so close to the Strait of Hormuz and to the shore of Iran. So this is the situation. The aircraft carrier group is located somewhere here. Two more strike groups are located to the west of Israel. We are talking about Gerald Ford strike carrier group and Charles de Gaulle, the French strike carrier group. They are located to the west of Lebanon and to the west of Israel. And they're not going to change their positions. They will stay here for a while. They will wait for additional updates. And we know that the fourth strike carrier group, the Ford George Bush carrier strike group, is moving from the Mediterranean Sea in the direction of Abraham Lincoln carrier group, which is located in the Arabian Sea. But the sources are saying that George Bush aircraft strike carrier group decided not to move through this strait, through the Suez Canal and the Strait of Mandeb in the direction of Abraham Lincoln, because it's unsafe, because Houthis control this area and they can attack the carrier group anytime. So that is why the United States of America decided to redeploy this aircraft strike carrier group almost through the entire Africa, and most likely it will take maybe weeks before this strike carrier group will be redeployed, which means that before the beginning of the next phase of the HOTS operation in the Middle East, 2 or 3 weeks will pass before this aircraft carrier group redeployed to this area, which means that Iran still have lots of time to prepare itself before the next phase of the conflict, which is going to be much more difficult in comparison with the previous one. Meanwhile, the Israelis continue their ground operation in the southern parts of Lebanon. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded, and according to information we have, the Israeli Defense Forces managed to encircle the settlement of Bint Jbail and the settlement of Ramesh in the southern parts of Lebanon. Now, it will take several days before, maybe weeks before, the Israelis are able to secure this territory, and only then the Israelis most likely will be able to move forward in the northern direction towards the river of Litani. But when talking about this map, about this situation, we can say that it will take weeks or maybe even months before the Israeli Defense Forces are able to get the river of Litani from the south, which means that the conflict on the territory of the Middle East will last as long as this operation in the southern part of Lebanon take time. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds us we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.